Have you ever wondered how a single act of violence could ignite a global conflict? It was June 1914. The spark that ignited the powder keg of Europe was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary. This act of violence, carried out by a young Serbian nationalist, was the catalyst that set the stage for World War I. But the underlying causes were far more complex. Europe at the time was a tangled web of alliances and rivalries. On one side, the Triple Entente, France, Russia, and the United Kingdom, and on the other, the Central Powers, Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy. Every nation was armed to the teeth, each suspicious and wary of the other. The assassination provided just the right excuse for these tensions to explode into warfare. And so, with the fall of a single man, the stage was set for the greatest war the world had ever seen. In the wake of the Archduke's death, a cascade of declarations of war rang out across Europe. In a chilling domino effect, the peace of the continent was shattered, one declaration after another. It all started with Austria-Hungary. In July of 1914, they declared war on Serbia, a reaction to the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. However, this was not a simple dispute between two nations. No, this was the spark that ignited a powder keg of complex alliances and rivalries, long simmering beneath the surface of European politics. Serbia, you see, was entangled in a web of alliances, and when they were threatened, their allies began to mobilize. Russia, bound by treaty to Serbia, was the first to come to their aid. This mobilization prompted Germany, allied to Austria-Hungary, to declare war on Russia. France, tied to Russia, found itself at war with Germany and, by extension, Austria-Hungary. Germany then launched an attack on Belgium, pulling Britain, allied to Belgium, into the fray. And just like that, within a matter of weeks, Europe was split into two major alliances. On one side, the Central Powers, composed of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and later the Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria. On the other, the Allies, initially made up of France, Russia, and the United Kingdom, later joined by Italy, Japan, and eventually the United States. These alliances were not just lines on a map, but a tangled web of promises, threats, and ambitions. Each country had its reasons for entering the war, be it honor, fear, or the promise of power. There was no single cause, no single villain. The war was a complex machine driven by a multitude of gears, each turning the other. The lines were drawn, the players were in place, and the world braced for what was to come. This was the beginning of a war the likes of which the world had never seen before. A war that would redefine the very concept of warfare and leave a lasting impact on the course of history. As both sides dug in, the Western Front soon became a deadly stalemate. A long and treacherous line of trenches stretched from the English Channel to the Swiss border. These trenches, the grim hallmark of World War I, would become the setting for a grueling 4-year stalemate that would cost countless lives. In these trenches, soldiers faced a daily reality of mud, disease, and constant artillery fire. The rain turned the ground into a thick, sucking mire that swallowed men and horses alike. The trenches were infested with rats and lice, spreading disease among the already suffering soldiers. The constant barrage of artillery fire was a relentless reminder of the omnipresent danger and death. Life in the trenches was a waiting game, a long, tedious countdown to the next big push, the next bloody and brutal assault on the enemy lines. These attacks were often hastily planned and poorly executed, leading to a staggering loss of life for little to no territorial gain. Among these, two battles stand out for their sheer scale and ferocity: the Battle of the Somme and the Battle of Verdun. The Battle of the Somme, launched in July of 1916, was intended to break the stalemate. Instead, it resulted in over 1 million casualties, making it one of the bloodiest battles in human history. The Battle of Verdun, lasting from February to December in the same year, was equally devastating. The German High Command intended it to bleed France white. The end result was a combined casualty count of over 700,000 for both the French and German armies. These battles, like so many others on the Western Front, achieved little more than adding to the mounting death toll. The front lines moved back and forth, but the stalemate held. Amid the mud and blood, the war raged on without a clear end in sight. While Europe was the epicenter, the shockwaves of the war reached far beyond its borders. In the Middle East, the Ottoman Empire, siding with the Central Powers, opened up a new front. Here, the Allies sought to secure vital oil supplies and trade routes. The British, with the help of Arab forces, led a successful campaign against the Ottomans, culminating in the capture of Jerusalem and Damascus. But this victory came at a cost. The secret Sykes-Picot Agreement between France and Britain carved up the Middle East into spheres of influence, sowing the seeds of future conflicts in the region. Meanwhile, in Africa, the war was fought in the shadows of the great European powers. Colonial troops were drafted into service, and battles raged from the sands of the Sahara to the jungles of East Africa. The war here was not just about territory, but resources, as both sides sought to control the vast mineral wealth of the continent. Across the vast expanse of the Pacific, the German colonies were quickly seized by Japanese and Australian forces. These actions, while far from the main theaters of war, were part of a larger strategy to cut off Germany from its overseas possessions. In April 1917, the United States, initially resolute in its neutrality, entered the war on the side of the Allies. The sinking of the passenger ship Lusitania by a German U-boat, along with the interception of the Zimmermann telegram proposing a German-Mexican alliance, pushed the US to declare war on Germany. With fresh troops and resources, the United States' entry marked a turning point in the war. The global reach of World War I was unprecedented. From the deserts of the Middle East to the jungles of Africa, from the islands of the Pacific to the heartland of America, the conflict touched every corner of the globe. Despite its name, World War I was not just a European war, it was a truly global conflict. After 4 long years of bloodshed, the war finally came to an end. On the 11th day of the 11th month of the year 1918, the guns fell silent. The armistice was signed, marking the cessation of hostilities on the Western Front. The signing of the armistice was a monumental moment, but it was just the beginning of a long and arduous journey towards peace. The world's eyes turned to the Palace of Versailles in France, where the terms of peace were being negotiated. In June of 1919, the Treaty of Versailles was signed. The terms were harsh for Germany, the supposed instigator of the war. Germany was forced to accept full responsibility for causing the war, a clause known as the War Guilt Clause. This was a bitter pill to swallow, and the treaty imposed severe financial reparations that crippled the German economy. The treaty also imposed territorial losses, military restrictions, and other stringent conditions. But the price of war was not just political or economic, it was human. The human cost of the war was staggering. Millions of lives were lost, countless others were injured, and the physical and psychological scars ran deep. The war had ravaged cities, towns, and villages, tearing apart families and communities. The landscape of Europe was forever altered, both literally and metaphorically. In the aftermath of the war, the world was a different place. Empires fell, new nations were born, and the map of Europe was redrawn. The war had changed the way people thought about war and peace, about nationalism and internationalism, about humanity itself. The war also planted the seeds for future conflicts. The harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles and the socio-economic turmoil it caused in Germany played a significant role in the rise of Adolf Hitler and the onset of the Second World War. The war may have ended, but its consequences would shape the world for generations to come.